Well, yeah, he actually did mention that. He said Colorado allowed mail-in ballot, which
Right.
means they
Well,
have the
that too, yeah.
yeah. So, what do you think about the outer space Air Force, outer Air Force, right? Outer Space
Space
Force,
Force.
Space Force. How important it is
I think
to.
it's very important. I think it's going to become even more important in the years ahead.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, space is going to be the new frontier. Besides the bottom of the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
outer space is going to be, with the satellites, protecting satellites, the ability to, go to other planets and the moon and things like that. So I think that the space race is going to heat up again like it was in the 1950s after the Russians launched Sputnik. And the space race was on, and then, that went all the way on until we landed on the moon in 1969.
Uh-huh. So this is something that we need to do.
I think
To
so.
yeah, a lot of force, a lot of yeah resource and money
Yeah,
into.
the ground forces, even the U.S. Air Force, are not in a position to defend our satellite system, our GPS system. Many of the spy satellites that we have orbiting the Earth. We have a lot of resources, and we've decided to increase the level of protection, I mean, for
Mhm,
them.
mhm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe you can start the program, then we can talk about that a little in detail. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Science Forum. Today it's September 2nd, and here's my dear friend Tom Otis. Tom, how are you?
I'm fine. Hello, everybody.
Hello. So nice to see you again after the long weekend. And then, yeah, we're just talking about the big announcement from White House from President Trump that we're going to move our outforce, a space force from Colorado to Alabama, which is a big movement. And then we're talking about the importance of the outer space in the future. And related situation is I heard Pete, our Secretary of Defense, he actually announced that he probably will change the name of DOD to DOW, which is Department of the War. So I don't know, he's making a joke or he's serious.
No, I think they're serious, but that was the original name. So it was the War Department up until 1949. So
1940.
throughout the World Wars, it was the War Department. Through World War II, War Department. And
Uh-huh.
and the statement about the name was that they changed it to Defense Department because of the increased heat, let's say, of the Cold War.
Mhm,
Ironically, as the Cold War heated up, they wanted to have the name of the Department of War changed to be the Defense Department. It was mainly responsible for the defense of the United States, especially as the Cold War was increasing.
wow. So if that's serious, that means the whole scenario will change, meaning this is wartime or we will have a real war in near future.
Well, it's, good question. I think the idea is, especially on Trump's part, is conveying a more aggressive name like war to
Mhm.
show that, if you mess with the United States, you're going to be sorry. That we're not just defending ourselves in
Right,
a diminished capacity, but we'll go to war with
right,
you
right.
and anybody anywhere that threatens the US, that we'd be ready to go to war with them.
Yeah, so it's changed the attitude from defense to offense. So it's a
I
huge
think
difference.
it's not necessarily that, well, I think it's mainly to say we could go on offense, that we're going to be capable of, in an instant, going to an offensive warlike mode. And I think that even though that was always true, I think he's just trying to convey the message that we're not going to be weak anymore.
Sure, sure, sure. So if we're going to involve a real war, where do you think it probably start from?
Good
Which
question. It could be the Middle East. It could be with China. It could be with Russia. Although I'm less convinced it would be with Russia. But right now you have the major meeting occurring in Beijing
right?
or in China, just outside Beijing,
Mhm.
with Xi Jinping, Putin, the head of India, Modi, uh, Kim Jong-un.
Mhm.
So all of these leaders, especially the former
Yeah.
communist and present communist leaders, are
Mhm.
having this meeting to say that they're not going to stand up for being bullied by the United States, either militarily or economically.
Mhm. So do you think it will work? Do you think the ally from the China, Russia, and North Korea will work?
No, I don't. But many of the military analysts do believe that, it's an ominous warning to us to watch out for these countries. They're going to form an alliance and be more powerful. But I think as of now, I think because the economy of the US is so strong, that I think that, and militarily and technologically so strong, that I think that, I don't know, I don't see where we're going to take that as a real serious threat, but it could be. I mean, they could, but normally they can't really get along. Don't forget, China and India have been killing each other at their border right now. They've been having border wars ongoing, much
Mhm.
less economic wars. And
Mhm.
I can remember going as far back as during the Nixon administration, when Nixon wanted to go to China, one of his big fears was that China and the Soviet Union are so close. Fellow
Mhm.
communists, they love each other. They're not going to put up with this. So anyway, there was the main spy that the U.S. had in the Kremlin was actually an informant of the FBI. And he later won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a couple of years later, he and his wife. He was an original member of the Communist Party in the United States in the 1920s. So
Oh.
he was very close with the Politburo and members of the Soviet government, especially Brezhnev. And so he was telling the FBI that behind the scenes, that is all fake. That the China Soviet Union alliance is appearances only. They say great things about each other. They don't mean it. And
Mm.
they're very competitive with each other. And if Nixon was to go ahead and go to China and visit with them, be the first president during, the era of Mao to go to China, that would drive, instead of making China and the Soviet Union closer, it would drive a political wedge between them, which it did. And so, based on that information, they went forward, and Henry Kissinger, went forward with making the arrangements for
Mhm.
Nixon to travel to China. And then later for Mao to come to the US. So, but that was a huge, almost gamble on our government's
Right.
part to take
Mhm.
the word of the FBI that the US, could open a channel of communication with China, and it would diminish the relationship of China and the Soviet Union, which it did.
Wow, what a history. What a history. So FBI is so important in the whole processing of decision.
Later on, Tom Clancy wrote several books that were phenomenal. One of them was Cardinal of the Kremlin, and it had to do with that kind of issue of how well informed the FBI and the US government became about what was occurring inside the Kremlin.
Mhm.
Now, later, interestingly, um, when I was at FBI headquarters in the early 90s, he was invited to speak to the agents in our big auditorium several times. And what originally happened was that when a couple of his books came out, Hunt for Red October was another one,
Oh.
that there was accusations he must be committing espionage to be getting that information in such detail. And so he was under FBI investigation, and
Mhm.
he was able to show the investigators that everything he obtained about military equipment and all of those issues he obtained from open source material. There were many books published, military books published, that described weapons and nuclear submarines and the capabilities of them. And so he writes these books, and as a result of proving that he did it by his own research and open research, not spying,
Uh-huh.
nobody in the government or in the military giving him secrets, none of that.
Mhm.
And so as a result, he became good friends with the FBI, the FBI director at the time,
Mhm.
Sessions. And then he was invited to speak on several occasions to FBI headquarters to come to the auditorium and give a lecture that everybody in the building that had the free time could go attend it. So that was a very important time.
Mhm.
And the government learned a lot from him, that
Mhm.
even though this material was out there and everybody should have known it, they really didn't put the information together. So
Oh,
he was phenomenal, but that's how much of the information he got was just out of open books.
fantastic. It's a fantastic story. Great, great. So, do you think FBI has the capacity as like that time to know that the real situation in China or in Russia today?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if they do or not,
Mhm.
because there have been so many changes to the FBI senior management recently, and
Mhm.
the last several years, that I don't know the capability of that. If they still have that.
Well, hopefully they still have that or almost have it, right?
Hope
Have,
so. Yeah,
yeah,
hope so. Yeah.
because this is so important to the direction of the country at on the critical moment of history. Yeah, so this is the outside enemies to US, but the more dangerous is inside enemy in our country, like George Soros. But the good news is August 26th at Truth Social, President Trump have this saying, George Soros, he point his name, and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protests and much more. All through the United States of America, we are not going to allow this lunatics to rip apart American anymore, never giving it so much as a chance of breathe and be free. So when I read that, I was so excited. I see the word regal. So then I immediately thought about you.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you tell us about more about regal and how we can use that to against Soros and his guns?
Well, the issue with Soros has been that since he grew up in Hungary during
Right.
World War II,
Mhm.
and he's Jewish. And as it ends up, he cooperated with the Nazis in helping round up Jews to be killed. And as a result of his background, it pretty much unrepentant, saying, "Yeah, I did all that." He's banned from he can't go home to his home country, Hungary, because they won't let him in.
Yeah.
So I think that that's interesting. So meantime, he deals in finances from England and around the world,
Mhm.
and he's been a huge financial enemy of the United States for years and
Mhm.
still is. And so funding now, what he's been doing is funding through his organizations very radical left-wing anti-American organizations. And
Mhm.
so a lot of for instance, right now, and in the last couple of years where we've had all of these protests in the United States, go back to say George Floyd, those
Mhm.
protests were funded by Soros organizations. They helped fund the signs, the equipment, the stuff that were brought to the demonstration sites. That didn't come up. The people didn't bring their own stuff, their own signs. Those signs were professionally made with
Mhm.
money from Soros and
Mhm.
his people. So now, as he's getting older, he's claiming that he's going to, have his son take over the control of the Soros organizations. And Trump has been, as the usual Trump, has been pretty open about calling the son an idiot. Well, he's a
Mhm.
moron. How much damage can he do to us? And
Mhm.
I think that that's
Mhm.
true. That may be. He may not have the skill set
Mhm.
of at being as evil or as crafty as the father, George Soros. So
Mhm.
we'll see where that goes in the years ahead. But I think more has come out now, and I've been critical of the FBI during the time of, the last couple of years under Comey, under
Mhm.
Christopher Wray,
Mhm.
where all these organizations are funding subversive activity in the United States. Why haven't they been penetrated? Why
Right.
haven't the FBI in my day would have got right into those organizations and compromised them?
Mhm.
And we haven't seen much of that in the most recent past. So I think that, that's going to be, to me, one of the major objectives of Kash Patel is to restore the FBI's ability to really protect the United States.
Mhm. Yeah, this is what we all expected, and we are all waiting. See some big thing happened. You actually described Soros, George Soros, crafty. So, can you explain that a little bit more? Why you
Well, has
say?
knowledge of how financial markets work and hedge funds and all of that that enabled him to become wealthy, become in the position that he's in. So he has, tremendous mental capability to do
Mhm,
evil and to hurt us, to hurt the West.
mhm,
And, it's amazing to me why he wants to hurt the United States and our Western allies so much, but he does.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a question that I have too. Well, he's here. He make his money here. His family's here. Everything's here. Yet he wants to destroy America.
Yeah.
So this is maybe we don't understand because we don't have his evil thoughts.
Well, we'll see how long he's able to get away with that
Right.
during this Trump administration. He got away with so much more the first time Trump came into office, but that may not be sustainable by him during Trump's second term.
Yeah. So it's so weird why he always can get away from the punishment. It's so obvious he is doing the Demis and
Well, because
hey,
our administration, our Department of Justice, has not had the desire to go after him. And then, of course, during the Biden and later Obama years, he's a hero to them, tearing down the government of the U.S., weakening us, and all of that. That's exactly what they wanted. So we'll see now, if Trump has an adequate Department of Justice, if Bondi is going to be strong enough to put prosecutors together that can do this, along with an FBI that's capable of conducting these very sensitive and important investigations like they used to.
why you said this is a sensitive investigation.
Well, because they have to develop informants, they have to get the financial information and deal with other countries to get that information. So it requires a lot politically and from our investigative partners around the world. And I'm not sure the capability of even the partners today compared to what it was.
I see. I see. Yeah. So, what is the difference between a social movement and a new type of crime in the law enforcement? Meaning, some people just like Antifa or Black Lives Matter, they said this is a social movement. This is legal. So you cannot charge us anything. So, what is the
That's
difference?
not true. Yeah, they say that, but that's a lie. Social movements do not need violence to carry out their objectives, and that's been the difference here, is that these movements have been funded and supported to become violent. And some of our stupid politicians, if you look at Waltz in Minnesota, when
It's
the
crazy.
George Floyd riots started, pretty much allowed Minneapolis to be attacked, burned, the police stations burned, and all of that. And I think that, during the Trump's first term, he was much more lenient, let's say, in not deploying the federal government into these areas. So you have the courthouse in Minneapolis burned to the ground. You have police stations closed down because they were under attack. You have businesses burned out, and then have that across the whole country. So you have this huge insurrection on a nationwide basis.
Mhm.
And from my opinion, the FBI was very, very limited as was all resources, law enforcement and military resources of the U.S. government, to put a stop to it and allow that the summer of love, as it was called, to go on,
Mhm.
and this to happen in cities across the country.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, talking about that, do you see the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois this couple of days? They just went crazy. They try to stop the National Guard to come to help them for the security. So do you,
We'll see where that goes because, Chicago, my hometown, is
right.
originally, has been the murder capital of the world. And all of that has been sustained by Democratic governors, Democratic mayors of Chicago. And then combine that, not just ideology, but then just being corrupt, stealing money and contracts and all the things that they've been doing. So Chicago has been a cesspool of corruption and violence and mayhem for a long time.
Mhm.
Now, back when I was an agent, my first 10 years in the FBI, I was an agent in the Chicago division. And back in those days, we ended up working with the Chicago police. We had task forces where the FBI, under the RICO statute and under federal law, would have the ability in an organized crime case, let's say, to
Mhm.
use wiretaps to gather evidence.
Mhm.
Federal court ordered electronic surveillance. State did not. The police in the state, in the cities, cross country, didn't have the authority to use wiretaps, to use that sensitive of a technique. So
Mhm.
what happened was we created these task forces where we had FBI agents combined with Illinois State Police, Chicago Police, County Police, all making a task force to try to address the crime problem, especially gangs. And
Mhm.
they began treating gangs as organized crime, like
Mhm.
the cartels could be. Like, obviously, organized crime was already big in Chicago because I ran that program.
Mhm.
The mafia in Chicago, commonly there called the outfit. But in
Mhm.
any event, we worked with the police and used federal wiretap authority against these gangs, against
Uh,
these organizations that normally the police by themselves wouldn't be able to do. And so then these groups could be federally prosecuted. And that task force idea of combining federal and state and local law enforcement, the
mhm.
idea was to combine all of them so that they could take advantage of the laws that allowed federal law enforcement to use very sensitive techniques. Now
Mhm.
that, we had those task forces, we had them all over. We had it in Washington, for example.
Mhm.
They were put together. The main gang in Washington that was a threat was called the J Street Gang.
Or J
And
Street.
the same thing. The FBI, Metro Police, and others combined to go after them federally. And it was
Mhm.
very successful. So the idea now that, Trump is sending in National Guard into D.C., there's no question he has the authority. It's very
Right.
interesting politically, if you notice, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of of Washington, has been very supportive of Trump.
Right. Right. Right.
So she's been saying this is great. He's doing a great thing. The
Mhm.
military here is doing a great thing, eliminating crime and arresting thousands of people and taking all these guns off the street and
Mhm.
all of that. And I think after a couple of weeks, they finally had their first murder in Washington a couple of days ago. But,
Mhm.
uh, but in any event, Chicago, we had these kind of task forces, and the mayors in those days were supportive of the FBI, supportive of the federal assistance. But now you look at Pritzker and you look at, chief of police and these guys, they're morons. And ideologically, they don't want to be shown how to do it by the federal government, and least of all by Trump.
So I just don't get it. Do people just vote them again and again? I
Yeah.
don't really.
Well, if you're going to ask that, ask the global question. Why do these people keep voting Democratic in these cities? Why
Yeah.
do they keep putting Democrat
Mhm.
mayors in office? And then the mayors put in these DEI chiefs of police and superintendents of police. And why is that happening? And now I see some people being interviewed even today
Mhm.
where they're talking about they want the help. They're very supportive of Trump bringing whatever that he can bring into their neighborhoods, the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, where the crime is so extreme. And they're saying that's what they want. Well, that's great. But when the election comes, who are the majority of people going to vote for? They're going to keep these people in office. Look at New York City right now.
Mhm.
This idiot that they're going to elect as mayor. He's not just an idiot, he's a revolutionary. What he wants to do there is evil. And so far, nobody is close to him in the polling.
I just simply don't get it. I just don't get it. People seems like cannot connect these things together and connect the bad situation with their own vote.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
can make change. You don't vote them. You vote better people. There are bad people out there, but they just don't. I just, yeah, I don't understand of that part. So it's just like we are not informed enough for the regular voters,
But
and
if
let
they are, even when they're informed,
they still
so what? Yeah, they still. So even informed, they still vote these people into office.
something wrong.
Could be,
Yeah, right,
could
right.
be.
Yeah, and yeah, I just have another question about the RICO. I still am very interested about the RICO, and because the RICO maybe can punish George Soros, which is a bad person, in my opinion. So how RICO is different from a typical a criminal case? The RICO is different kind, right?
I
Or
don't really know the details of how that differs or why it's needed or, you
uh-huh,
know, to me, the criminal laws are sufficient to go after Soros
mhm.
and
But
his organization and his funding, his conspiracy to support the rioting over the last several years.
mhm,
These
mhm.
groups continue to be supported financially by his organization.
Right, right.
So that's no strange thing to apply conspiracy laws and the actual laws of insurrection and violence and those type of things to do it.
Mhm.
I don't know.
So when you, as a law enforcement, when you invest the regular crime and the legal crime, so is that different way to invest them, or
I'm not
this?
sure. I'm not sure how that is.
Okay,
So
but
I
this,
don't know that it's necessary.
yeah, the sentence is different, right? The legal you can sentence life in jail, but
Yeah,
some other you don't have it. No, no, it's so weird. It's but why legal is so special? It's not right.
I don't know. I don't know why they think it is so special compared to, what we already have.
Okay. So the when you someone sentenced using the legal, he can be put into the jail lifetime. Is that
Well, a lot of, using the RICO statute, you can be putting these people in jail for life without parole if they're funding what amounts to murder and other serious crimes. And those crimes are specified in the RICO statute. So whether it's murder, robbery, some of the other serious crimes,
Mhm.
and they can carry a life sentence without parole. So if you
Oh,
get convicted in those cases, you go back to John Gotti at the time in the 90s, leader of the Gambino family.
mhm.
1992, he gets convicted under RICO. He gets sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Right.
Now, while he's in prison, he develops throat cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So when he needs to have surgery on his throat, that's done within the prison system. He doesn't get to get out and go home because he's sick and like the old days.
Mm-hmm.
They have medical facilities in the prison system, so he gets his surgery without being released. And sickness or no sickness, he ends up dying in prison.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is why they are afraid of RICO.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah, because of the sentencing is so high and strong and there's no yeah, under those kind of convictions, there's no early release for good behavior.
Mhm.
None of that applies. So That's why. And then what happens is because the sentences are so extreme,
Mhm.
then people try to cooperate as soon as they can become the main informant because
Right,
maybe they can get a good deal. And
right.
so, we used to joke in the FBI at the time that we were going to need to install, these counters like in a butcher shop where you pull it down and you have a number, and then they could call back, okay, number 92, you're come back. Oh, I'll confess, I'll testify, I'll do everything. Okay, good, thank you. Number 93, come in. And that
Good
was the
work.
idea that like a butcher shop, to get the best deal, they
Mhm,
would the earlier you could show up at a federal
mhm,
building, at the FBI office, the sooner you would be interviewed by the agents and possibly get a good deal.
mhm, mhm. Well, so this is that works. Hopefully, we can do something to Soros and his organization, which he deserve it. And just like you said, we'll see if the DOJ and FBI have the manpower and the courage to do so.
Well, the courage is the bigger thing. They have the manpower, they have
Mhm,
expertise, they have agents that have done these kind of cases for years.
mhm.
And, it's not rocket science. They just need the political will to do it.
Okay. So the decision to start to investigate him will be a long process or can be very short decision, like short time.
It could be both. I think that there's probably, if they've been doing their job, and some agents may have been doing their job in the last 4, 5, 8 years, they should have a lot of evidence already gathered
Right.
on these issues. And now it just needs to be packaged by agents that know what they're doing and prosecutors that know what they're doing. And that's been the other problem, is that Department of Justice had been completely compromised under Merrick Garland and
Mhm.
Biden. So you had no ability to really prosecute sensitive cases and no ability to investigate and package the evidence in a way for proper presentation in court.
Right, right. Yeah, that's the thing. So we're almost it's September now. We have 3 months left and then 2026 and then midterm. What do you think about the midterm? Because I think it's so important and it depend it's will decide if Trump policy can go on. So
I agree. I think one of the big factors in the midterms is going to be the, the apportionment of congressional districts. And so you see the gerrymandering issue.
uh-huh.
Now you have the Democrats trying to continue to do that in Texas and failing. You have what's his name in California, Newsom,
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing to keep Democrats in party. And you see that in several places. So if the Republicans can win enough key state realignments
Hmm.
to improve the number of Republican districts,
Hmm.
that would put it, to me, will put it out of reach of being stolen by Democrats.
Right.
So we hope that that's going to keep happening. And I think that's why they're panicking. Democrats are panicking.
Hmm. So do you think the
I think Texas is a prime example. Texas, you had all these other Democrats in the country supporting the
mhm,
Democrats from the Texas State House that weren't going to sit, they weren't going to allow a quorum. In other words, they were not going to have enough
mhm,
people in the room
mhm,
to allow proceedings to go forward
mhm,
in Texas.
mhm,
And by what they did then is left the state. They
mhm,
went some to Washington and New York and other places to hide, which prevented the quorum in Texas. Well, then what happens is the governor says, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. We're not going to deposit your pay anymore in your bank. You have to come get it, and we'll give you the check. You have to come back to Texas. You have to, do a variety of things. And then finally, after so much time, then they realized they weren't going to win. They quit, came back to Texas.
mhm,
Republicans in the long run ended up winning.
mhm.
And I think they increased, I don't know, 5 or 6 congressional seats.
I guess
Now,
it's five.
yeah, so that'll be, an interesting thing of how that goes in other states that look at that and go, no point in trying that.
Mhm, mhm,
Texas was absolutely dedicated. They were receiving financial support to do it. And I think Democrats in the rest of the country said, nah, that's not going to work.
Mhm. Yeah, Newsom in California, he's trying so hard. And we're going to have a special election on November, which will decide we're going to allow him to district the California map. Um, if he can do it, we'll add five more seats for the Democrats. So five seats more for Republic in Texas and five more seats for Democrats in California. So it's balanced out. So
Yeah.
it's going to depend on the other states, the Republic, the red states, if they can get up and then just do the same thing.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And talking about treason, is this considered one of the criminal offenses or a kind of a special crime for treason? Treason.
Treason?
Yeah.
Well, treason, that's going to be a long, I guess, a hard violation to prove because
Mm-hmm.
normally the jury and the judges and everything, they're going to be looking to see if someone is actually aiding an enemy of the country right now, whether they're selling top secret research from military applications or whatever it might be. So, or, really trying to undermine the security of the United States. So I don't know. I think most jurisdictions would be reluctant to actually return guilty verdicts for treason, which could possibly carry the death penalty.
Right. So, in your memory, is there any high-ranking officers ever being found guilty of treason in U.S. history?
I think
High.
back in the early 50s when you had nuclear research, so there were some FBI cases where the Rosenbergs, for instance, were basically executed for treason. They were helping the Soviets. They were spies for the Soviet Union, and that got proven, and they were found guilty of it.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there were some along the way, but especially during the Cold War,
Mhm.
any help to give nuclear technology to the Soviet Union, would have been regarded as serious by anybody. There was no arguing that that was going on.
Right. So you mentioned that we probably because we changed the name from DOD to DOW, which is the Department of War, that might be have a war in the near future. And you mentioned different names, and you mentioned China. Do you see that American will have a war, a real war with China because of what? Taiwan? Of
No, I don't. I don't. But China doesn't know that, for sure. So that's the big thing that they try to do. That's the
Mhm,
purpose of espionage. So you don't have to rely on what your enemy or adversary says. What will they really do?
mhm,
All the rhetoric, all the talk and everything, all the bluster. So what?
mhm,
What are they really prepared to do?
mhm,
Will
mhm,
they attack? Will they do those type of things?
mhm.
And usually they think they won't.
Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, for tomorrow, but I think it's today in China because we have like 15 hours time difference. They're gonna have a big parade.
Right.
So we're gonna have Xi Jinping in the middle and Putin in the right and Kim Jong-un in the left. So it's so funny to see that because Kim Jong-un just sent his soldier Ukraine, and there are over 100 soldiers died in the in Ukraine fight with Russia, and then Putin sit in the other side of of Xi Jinping. What they gonna do together? They're enemy within themselves.
Well, the Soviet Union and the United States theoretically were enemies and
Mm-hmm,
then formed an alliance to do World War II against Hitler.
mm-hmm,
And there were political people in the US advising that we should have joined Hitler to attack the Soviet Union back then, back during World War II. And
mm-hmm,
don't worry about that little thing called the Holocaust and all that, or it wouldn't have happened. Some people have said the Holocaust would never have happened if
mm-hmm,
we had joined with Hitler in 1940 or 41. But the truth was that as Hitler's soldiers were going into these various places, they were killing Jews.
Mhm.
And in 1941, when they attacked Russia under Operation Barbarossa, as they went to these areas of Russia, they killed thousands, shot them. And they didn't even have the camps all set up like they did later on for
So,
mass murder, but they
mm,
still murdered thousands and thousands in these places. So that's one idea that people have said that. On the other hand, the celebration that's going on right now in China is commemoration of the defeat of Hitler and
mhm,
the success of the Soviet Union and China and the other countries in defeating Hitler. Now,
mhm,
there is a good argument to be made that the Soviet Union won World War II.
mhm,
And they had sacrificed about 50 million of their people.
mhm,
And I think the number of US soldiers killed in World War II was about 500,000 or a little bit less, 450,000, compared to the millions that the Soviets and the others. Now,
mhm.
we gave, you know, airplanes and tanks and equipment to the Soviet Union to wage war, but they paid a high price with the number of their citizens and soldiers that were killed.
Mhm. Right, right. So I don't know. See, when you read the history, you just feel sometimes feel sad. We cannot find peace with each other. There are always wars among human beings,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's human nature to fight each other, to
Yeah,
try to be supreme, to try to be higher, and the countries that are the strongest,
yeah,
uh, they decide. Roman Empire was 1,000 years
right.
of the Roman military basically dominating practically all of Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and
Mhm,
that lasted a long time before they finally kind of fell apart from within, corruption and later laziness and other issues that sometimes rich countries just give it up. They become weak
right. From within. This is the
from
key.
within.
Yeah, from within. And then lastly, I know that you went to Gettysburg, pretty recent. And then do you mind give us a little bit of history about Gettysburg and how it's important for us to remember Gettysburg as American citizen?
Well, Gettysburg, is widely regarded as the turning point of the Civil War. And
Mm-hmm,
the reason was that when the Civil War began, it started with the attack by students from the Citadel Military Academy
mm-hmm,
attacking Fort Sumter in Charleston Bay. And
mm-hmm,
then at that time, the Union sent ships to get to rescue the Union soldiers out of Charleston, to give up the fort to the south.
mm-hmm,
And with that, and that was in April of 63 or 61, then Lincoln, said, okay, I'm going to send troops into the South. We're going to stop this. And then what happens is all these states in the South decide they're going to become an independent country, the
mm-hmm,
Confederate States of the United States, as opposed to the United States. And they're going to become their own country and secede, eh, separate from the Union, no longer be part of the Union of the United States of America. And so at that time, I should back up. It's hard to find the right spot to start. Many of the Union soldiers were from the South as well. Robert E. Lee himself, many
mm-hmm,
of the other ones, many graduated from West Point, fought in the main U.S. Army, which had been at war in Mexico in 1848. So they knew each other very well.
mm-hmm,
The When the secession happens, Robert E. Lee was regarded as one of the best military minds in the entire army. He was offered the lead position to be in charge of the Union Army,
mm-hmm,
and he turned it down. He said, "I could never fight against my fellow Virginians and Southerners." So he and others turned it down. when the Civil War happens, these guys know each other very well.
Like a brother.
Lee, and yeah, Longstreet, Lee's number two during the Civil War, I mean,
Mhm.
during Gettysburg, was good friends, and their wives were good friends with Ulysses S. Grant.
Mhm.
So, and that friendship was resumed later after the Civil War for decades after the Civil War ended with Longstreet and Grant.
Mhm.
But in any event, Lee, when the battles start, the Lincoln sends the army into the South. And one of their first major battles is Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Mhm.
And the river that's in between Fredericksburg and Northern Virginia is the Rappahannock River. So they're going to send the military, they're going to cross the Rappahannock and attack the town of Fredericksburg and then go up into the hills behind it and attack the Southern Army, the Confederate Army up there. What happens is the Union gets slaughtered. And Lee, they didn't cross the river right away because of flooding and rain and all of this. So by time they did cross, Lee had time to move his army up into the high ground behind Fredericksburg, to the south of Fredericksburg. When the
Mhm.
Union finally comes up that hill, they get slaughtered.
Mhm.
So they lose that. Lee wins that battle. Then shortly after, they have the next battle. This is in December of 62. The
Mhm.
next battle is going to be the following spring in Chancellorsville.
Mhm.
And when that battle happens, the South wins again. And this is where Lee's right-hand person, Thomas Jackson, nicknamed Stonewall Jackson, that he
So,
got at the Battle of Bull Run earlier, um, they rout the Union at Chancellorsville. And the Union then scrambles to go back to Washington, to go back north 50 miles.
mhm.
Jackson, while he's out looking at where the positions of the Union Army is, as he's returning to his camp, his own soldiers mistook him for Yankees and shot him in the shoulder. So he ends up a couple of weeks later, he has his arm amputated, but he dies later of infection. In those days, no antibiotic, no
Mhm.
penicillin, none of that. So when his shoulder gets infected, he ends up developing pneumonia and dies in the hospital. And
Mhm.
he was Lee's number two, is his favorite general and most trusted general. So that's when James Longstreet uh, gets appointed, by Lee. He's going to be the new number two. Now, up until this time, Lee has never lost a battle. So
Mhm.
he's regarded as invincible. And so he takes his army, and they had gone into Maryland the year before and fought at Antietam, but it was kind of a draw with the Union. Nobody really won. Lee went home.
Mhm.
Thousands and thousands, with the bloodiest single day in American history. But Lee goes back to the South, and that's when they do Fredericksburg and they do Chancellorsville. So now Lee decides they're learning that as the next presidential election is approaching, Lincoln is becoming increasingly unpopular because the Union keeps losing. All these generals, one after he fires a general, then the next one and the next one,
Mhm.
and Lee keeps winning. So Lee decides what he's going to do is invade the North. And so he marches his army, about 100,000 soldiers, up pretty much like the Shenandoah Valley, go up to the north, cross into Maryland, then cross into Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
and they end up just outside of Gettysburg at that time. And then later, the Union now is trying to go north back to the same area because
Mhm.
they had been in Virginia also. So everybody's leaving Virginia, going north. Um, and the idea that Lee had was that he was either going to capture the capital of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg,
Mhm.
which was a big industrial town for the
Mhm.
for the North,
Mhm.
or he was going to encounter the Union Army and wipe them out because he's the best and they're invincible and they've won every battle. And all the Union generals have been weak and lost every battle.
Mhm.
And so what happens outside of Gettysburg, one of the generals of the South, and a lot of these Southern troops, they're marching hundreds of miles, many of them barefoot. And so uh, General Heath decides to go into Gettysburg and go shopping and get shoes for the troops.
Uh,
Not necessarily pay for them, but get the shoes.
sure.
And they didn't know that there were some Union soldiers starting to arrive in Gettysburg. And so that's where the battle happens because they run into each other. Heath had been told, and the Southern generals were told by Lee, do not engage the Union Army because we don't have all our troops. Longstreet and many of the others are still going to be arriving in the next day or two.
Sure.
So, so they don't. And then
So
what
he
happens
knows
is,
that they met each other and he said, just hang on, waiting for the other troops to come, right?
yeah, so yeah, the troops are going to come. And so now later they arrive at Cashtown, which is 8 miles to the west of Gettysburg.
Pretty close.
And
Mhm.
and they're gonna mass on that road into Gettysburg and go in and go ahead and fight the Union there.
Uh-huh.
But Lee is not particular about where the fight happens as long as they win and defeat the entire. Then he can still negotiate with Lincoln
Right,
if
right, right.
they beat the army,
Uh-huh.
with the election coming 6 months later or whatever.
Mhm.
So so anyway, the army starts going up the road towards Gettysburg,
Mhm.
and one of the first groups from the Union Army, known as the Army of the Potomac, the
Mhm.
Southern Army was referred to as the Army of Northern Virginia, but
Mhm.
the general is General John Buford.
Mhm.
So Buford has cavalry, and normally cavalry can't fight the main body of an army.
Mhm.
Uh, so Buford sets up just outside the west end of Gettysburg, where there's a seminary. He goes up into the tower and he can see that the Confederate troops are going to be coming.
Mhm.
And so he sets up his defenses. Now he's only the Southern Army is coming with about 20,000 troops. Buford has only about 2,500.
Mhm.
But they set up there and they're waiting for the main body of the Potomac, the Union Army, to come from the south, come up into Gettysburg. And
Mhm.
they're maybe half a day or a day away. So Buford recognizes that if they don't hold back the Confederate Army is going to go up and there's high ground ridges along the west end. That's why the military leaders always would refer to that as it's good ground. It's high, it's lovely ground, or they use whatever expression. It usually means that they can command the heights because
Mhm.
it's very difficult to go uphill
Right,
and fight an enemy.
right.
So Buford, he ends up, instead of just being able to hold back the Confederate Army for an hour or two, they hold him back for most of the day on the first day. And finally, General Reynolds, he was widely regarded as the best general in the Union Army at that time. Now,
Mhm.
Grant is way out west along the Mississippi fighting in Vicksburg, which he captures. But the main body of the Union Army is John Reynolds.
Mhm.
Reynolds brings his troops into Gettysburg. He on horseback meets with General Buford, and they
Mhm.
discuss this. And Buford says, "Okay, we're gonna, do what we can." And Reynolds says, "Okay, as soon as my troops arrive, we're going to be able to relieve you and take the main brunt."
Mhm.
Reynolds almost immediately gets shot and killed.
Oh.
Here's the best general of the North. He's killed almost immediately. But in any event, Buford holds back the Confederate Army, and it helps keep the Confederates from getting the high ground.
Mhm. Mhm.
The
Mhm.
other thing they tried to do was that there was a mountain on the north end of the what would be the Union line, and General Lee issues an order to that general, Ewell. He tells Ewell, take that hill, take that high ground if practicable. Now, the
Mhm.
word practicable means feasible. Is it possible? If it's possible, take it
If you can, right?
if you can.
Mhm.
Ewell, they've been marching for days. It's 100 degrees. They're in Ewell, they're really, really worn out.
Mhm.
Ewell decides it's not practicable, so he doesn't go up the hill.
Um,
The Union sets up shop, and then the Union spreads their troops all the way down the ridge line from north to south. And at the north end, it was kind of in a curve, which they referred to as the fish hook. But
Mhm.
in any event, Union now is all high ground, and the South is going to attack. Now, at that point, General Longstreet, who is Lee's right-hand general after the death of Stonewall Jackson,
Mhm.
Longstreet wants to fight a defensive war. We should not go up those hills. We'll be slaughtered.
Mhm.
He's arguing with Lee, we need to set up, leave Gettysburg, pull out, go further south, get in between the Union Army and Washington, D.C., pick
Mhm.
high ground, and
Mhm.
then the Union will have to attack us on lovely ground that we choose.
Yeah, sure,
Lee
sure.
says, no, I can't pull out. The enemy is here, we're going to fight here.
Uh,
And that he makes the decision that that's what they're going to do. So that's what happens is that you have battles happening along the ridge line,
mhm.
including one of the most famous, the Battle of Little Round Top, where Joshua Chamberlain, commander of the 20th Maine,
Mhm.
they set up on that top, and the Southern Army attacked all day. They keep pouring up the hill. He keeps shooting them down, and it finally culminates in the Union Army is almost completely out of ammunition. So they
Mhm.
fix their bayonets on the end of their rifles, the long knife that attaches to the rifle. And Chamberlain orders a bayonet charge. Many of the soldiers have no bullets, but they have the bayonet. So they just start running down the hill and screaming and yelling, and the Confederates on the hill surrender. And Little Round Top is saved that day.
Mhm.
So, but that's why, is because of the delay and not taking the high ground, and Lee insisting that they're going to attack the high ground, that they end up, kind of being slaughtered. The next day, the third day, is Pickett's charge, it's called.
Mhm.
So Lee decides that the Union has probably fortified the far left end of the hook, the far
Mhm.
other end, and therefore they're going to be weak in the middle.
Mhm.
So they're going to fire cannons into the middle
Mhm.
and severely weaken the Union troops.
Mhm.
Except the cannons, hundreds of cannonballs go too high to go over. They don't do enough damage.
Mhm.
The soldiers are hiding in a group of trees at the end of the long field that separates the Union and the South.
Mhm.
And there's 15,000 soldiers in a line that's a mile long, mile across.
Mhm.
And so now General Pickett from Virginia is going to lead the charge across that field. And
Mhm.
Longstreet is practically crying because he knows they'll be slaughtered.
Mhm.
And he can't bring himself to actually give the order charge.
Mhm.
Pickett, it's well documented. Pickett is asking him, General, should we attack? Should we charge? And Longstreet can't say yes. He just does this, nods.
Mhm.
And Pickett takes that, okay, that's a go. We're going to go. And
Mhm.
so Pickett, out of the 15,000 that go across 1 mile open field toward the Union line, 7,000 are killed, and many of the others are wounded and straggled back to the original line. And so Lee now knows he's lost. He's lost pretty much the whole Battle of Gettysburg, and
Mhm.
he retreats to go back to Virginia. And the
Mhm.
supply train of wounded and everything else that they took was a couple miles long,
Mhm.
but he's able to save half of his army, and they make it back through Maryland into Virginia, across the Potomac. And yet again, Lincoln is disgusted because he thought Meade would be better than all the earlier generals, and he had put Meade in charge of the Northern Army 2 days before Gettysburg starts.
Mhm.
But then what happens is Lincoln's following the battle closely by
Mhm.
telegraph, and he can't believe that Meade doesn't go after Lee and wipe out the Southern Army.
Mhm.
Basically, lets them go.
Right.
So that's another catastrophe. But the South, there was some people say, well, they didn't really lose it and everything, but they never again invaded the North. They didn't defeat the Union Army. They didn't accomplish the political objectives of either wiping out the army or capturing Harrisburg or
Right.
some of the other things. So as a result of that, uh, Gettysburg is considered the turning point of the
Mhm.
war, but not quite over. It goes on for another 2 years. Lee
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
makes it back to the South,
Mhm.
and so the soldiers keep on fighting. Now, later, a couple of years later, after Grant in the North has been winning battle after battle,
Mhm.
then Lincoln finally decides to put Grant in charge of the entire Union military.
Mhm.
Now, Grant was rumored to be an alcoholic. He's always drinking whiskey all day and all that. And the other generals, when they heard Lincoln was going to appoint Grant in charge, they were bad-mouthing Grant behind his back to Lincoln.
Uh-huh.
He's an alcoholic. He drinks too much. He this, he that. Lincoln says sarcastically to them, basically, shut up. Find
Mhm.
out what Grant is drinking and send that to every one of my generals and have all my other generals,
To drink it,
stocked
yeah.
up with that.
Uh-huh.
But that's what the key of Gettysburg. It didn't end the war, but it really ended the South going into capturing the North, suing
Right.
for peace and all of that. So as a result, because the Union is perceived to have won that battle decisively and Lee to have lost the battle, Lincoln gets reelected. Even though there was rumors that he might not get reelected, he gets
Right.
he gets reelected to his second term to
Mhm.
see the war finish the war.
Wow. What a history. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, a bad decision changes everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
It's
it's
interesting. The parallel to that is the Japanese military at the beginning of World War II.
mhm,
And they had a term for it, but they kept winning. Pearl Harbor and Hong Kong and all of these places, Singapore, and they kept winning and winning and winning in the Pacific. And many of the Japanese generals later said that victory fever, I think they had some nickname for constantly winning and thinking you're invincible.
mhm,
And then they're going to conquer Midway Island, gateway to California and the west coast of the US. And then they get severely, Midway is the end of their conquest of the Pacific in World War II. They get
mhm,
wiped out. And, so the Americans win the Battle of Midway 6 months after Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is in December
mhm,
1941.
mhm.
Midway is the end of May and early June 42. So very similar that the
Yeah,
Japanese thought we're invincible. They can't beat us. And that's kind of what, Robert E. Lee got a little bit of that victory fever. And
right.
his soldiers believed, they thought Lee was just so great he could never lose. So they were totally loyal to him even after Gettysburg. They stayed
Mhm,
loyal to him.
right. So it's remind me that is President Trump is our Gettysburg if we are being invaded by the leftist, the globalist, and they winning and winning and winning, even they took the 2020 election. They're winning. They cannot beatable. But turn out we have Trump, and hopefully it's our Gettysburg.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
very similar. The globalists have had their day,
yeah,
but not anymore. And
yeah,
so it's just a matter of, at what point they're really totally defeated.
right.
But you look at some of the World Economic Forum and some of these other global organizations, they're pretty much out. They have
Yeah,
lost their ability.
yeah.
And yeah,
Remember,
Trump has basically stood
mhm,
against it.
yeah, yeah, as you just mentioned, thank you so much that after Gettysburg is still the war between North and South for 2 years. And
Yeah,
just like right now, we still see the fight
right.
other, and then we will win. Yeah, we will
Yeah,
win.
the South, the battles, what they didn't realize so much, maybe Lee did, but Lee is winning these battles.
Mhm,
But if the Union in a given battle has 10,000 killed and the South has 7,000 killed, well, the
mhm,
South won.
mhm. Right.
But they had almost unlimited resources for the
That's
North to replace the losses. The
right.
South didn't. So each time they go into battle and lose half their soldiers or more, in the long run, they can't be replaced.
Right.
The supplies cannot be replaced. And the economy of the South was basically built on cotton.
Mhm.
And the slave labor was so that they could pick cotton for free without having to hire farm
Mhm.
workers.
Right.
And the union by that time is industry is developing, the industrial revolution. And so
Mhm.
they're starting to basically develop the supplies they need and the equipment and the manpower almost unlimited. And
Mhm.
The South could not match that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty similar, like the situation today.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Tom, to give us the history lesson, which history repeats itself just in different forms. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
the
you so much.
fortunate for me is that I live in Northern Virginia, not too far from Dulles Airport, Sterling, Virginia. And the majority of Civil War battles were within about 2 hour drive from my house,
Mhm.
including Gettysburg. It takes about an hour and a half to get from my house to Gettysburg in Pennsylvania.
That's-
So, so that makes a big difference in my mind of being interested in history and learning more and more about it.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing with us. We need to know the history, learn the history, and remember the history. Thank you
Right.
so much. Yeah.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
I will translate that. It's so interesting for the history parts. So interesting. Thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll see you next week.
See you then.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.